Chamber will continue the deliberation on the proposed report under parliamentary parliamentary. Your leader. That's interesting, sir. Sila kami sa
Gimana kan? Agad mo na. Sige, sige.
The parliamentary speaker, that's extremely Your Honor, names of members would like to be on the period of interpretation. There are five or six members who already signified to clarify some points reported in session. I am here, Honorable Mahamawali, MPW Makaraya, MP Sakunda, Santi, MP Sa. I believe I see people recognize the ones who already agreed on the intent. So, we should obey the recommendation. We will recognize first the names that were mentioned. Thank you very much. Yes, and the Executive Majority Leader, started saying, I always see among the members present. So the majority must be recognized. If we Yes, it's a time. Thank you. Support the passage the BTA party known as peace wars. However, I have some questions. for purposes of hygiene and enhancing citizen code so that the city environment will produce quality laws. Quality laws will produce also quality workforce. Mr. Speaker, I believe that quality workforce is a contributing factor to the attainment of moral governance. Kaya po at sakit Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Fa-inna Allah azza wa jalla muhsinun
yuhibbul ihsan." Verily, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, is excellent and He loves excellence. Means He loves quality. My first question, Mr. Speaker, is on Article 6 on the definition of terms, specifically page 2, letter R on moral governance. It says, it refers to the set of rules, practices, and processes completely also in this definition. My question, Mr. Speaker, is what is the difference between the moral governance and good governance? Minister Jajuri.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Mr. Speaker, in response to the question, first let us lay down the basis for the language that appears in the definition of moral governance. I believe this is called from the Administrative Code as well as an introduced amendment coming from MP Latif and this was deliberated in the level of the Committee on Rules. And in response to the question, I guess there's a lot of intersection between the definitions of good governance and moral governance. I would even dare say that when you have moral governance, that is also good governance. But I guess there is an emphasis on the matters of driving away or shunning graft and corruption, and as well as moral values to guide the civil servants in the execution of his tasks and duties.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe that control of corruption is also in the definition of good governance. But I don't know if you agree with me that, as you mentioned, it's more on moral values. In other words, is it because of the spiritual element, Mr. Speaker? Is that so?
I believe so.
If that is the
correct,
case, Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment later on, inshallah.
Let me just point out, Mr. Speaker, that the exact language appears in the Bangsamoro Administrative Code. So we lifted it from the Administrative Code and also used it in the Civil Service Code so that there's consistency and uniformity in the definition. So any amendment may, I would say, may result in some confusion if we have a different definition that appears in two laws passed by the same parliament, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, but I think the amendment is for enhancement. It will not actually, it will not create a problem on the content of the definition. My second question, Mr. Speaker, is on Article 36 on the employment status of teachers. It is said that the employment status of teachers to any teaching position shall be any of the following: permanent, provisional, temporary, substitute, and contractual. My question, Mr. Speaker, does this include also Madaris teachers?
Again, let me just point out, Mr. Speaker, that the status of employment of teachers, particularly the section that was
30
cited, Article
36.
36, is based on the ora-ora. So it's again lifted from the ora-ora and placed here in our Civil Service Code. And as we mentioned earlier or yesterday, there is the matter of the employment of Madaris teachers, and our proposed language or the proposed provision in the Civil Service Code is that it should be the education code that should provide for the qualification standards, the status of employment of the Madaris teachers, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I think I need to introduce some amendments. This is to be consistent with Article 78 on Madaris teachers also, and Article number 80 of Education defined. Para at least consistent po siya. Anyway, later on sa period of amendments, inshallah. My third question, Mr. Speaker, is on Article 63. Positions exempt from publication and posting. The following are exempt from the publication and posting requirements. Letter A, primarily confidential. Letter B, policy determining. Ang aking katanungan po sa letter C na nagsasabi highly technical, which includes the faculty and academic staff of state, local colleges and universities, and scientific and technical positions in scientific research and institutions with established merit systems. Ang tanong ko is, what is the basis of this exemption?
Mr. Speaker, the whole section, Article 63, is part of the ora-ora. It appears in Section 26, Rule 7 of the 2017 ora-ora as revised in 2018. So the same language, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I have here the Republic Act number 7041. It says that the CSC National mandates agencies to strictly abide by the rules on the publication and posting of vacancies to ensure transparency and equal opportunities in the recruitment and hiring of government workers. Vacant positions authorized to be filled should be published and posted in at least 3 conspicuous places for a period of at least 10 calendar days for the national government agencies, government-owned or controlled corporations, and specifically, I would like to mention state universities and colleges. I repeat, this is per Republic Act number 7041, an act requiring regular publication of existing vacant positions in the government offices, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, and at least 15 calendar days for local government units per Republic Act 7160 or the Local Government Code of 1991. And under the new 2017 ora-ora, it says the screening, evaluation, and deliberation of applicants by the agency's Human Resource Merit Promotions and Selection Board should begin only after the mandatory publication period? Mr. Speaker.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the law that was cited was enacted in 1991. The one that we are citing and which the provisions of which we incorporated in the Civil Service Code, which exempts from publication the positions of the highly technical positions, faculty, and academic staff of state and local colleges and universities, is the Ora, which is uh, came out in 2017 but amended in 2018. So it's a much later enactment, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, but I would like to register that what I mentioned on the Republic Act and on the Ora, the mandatory publication period. Anyway, my last uh, question, Speaker, actually this is more of recommendation in Article 121 on the Sharia bar eligibility threshold. Although I believe that I understand the explanation of the proponent yesterday, the 2014 uh, Sharia bar examinations conducted thereafter should be applicable for first and second level positions. Whereas before that, only in the first level position. My concern only is more on the application of those who pass the Sharia bar examinations. Kasi may alam po ako na naging judge ng Sharia bar sa siyang counselor and yet hindi po siya practicing Muslim. This is not to discriminate our brothers, those who pass the Sharia bar, pero ang akin lang po is the word Sharia alone is mabigat po yan because it defeats the purpose. Sana hindi po to mangyari sa farm ang mga bagay na to. Yung maging judge ng Sharia ay non-practicing Muslim po siya. Yun lang po, Mr. Speaker. Maraming salamat po. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Satar, for your inquiries. Majority Leader, we now recognize MP, the gentleman from Lanao, MP Dr. Safrula Dipatuan for his interpellation. May we request MP Dipatuan to use the other podium?
Sorry.
So there will be a smooth and uninterrupted deliberation. Thank you, MP Dipatuan. Please proceed, sir, Your Honors.
Okay. Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Majority Floor Leader. Let me first state very clearly that I am for the immediate passage of the Bangsamoro Civil Service Code. But of course, I also give importance to the fact that we cannot sacrifice the quality of the codes that we are passing. I even realized this before I come in. The reason why I am late a little bit is because I am glued to the screen of my Android phone, watching the ongoing deliberation or hearing of the congressional committees with regards to the extension of the BARM. And I am becoming emotional when our leaders in the BARM are being questioned with regards to the delay in the passage of our codes, which become part of our principal mandates. So this is just a a point of clarification, because in spite of the very exhaustive discussion that we have yesterday, my confusion uh, was not addressed. And so, uh, I would like to just clarify by saying that with regards to our school division superintendent, these are third level positions, and that is why they require the service eligibility of CESO. In fact, in my previous conversations with our minister of MBHTE, he mentioned to me that the reason why uh, some of the school division superintendent that are in place now um, are merely OIC or acting in capacity is because they do not possess the CESO eligibility. So what I am saying is that what I understand is that CESO eligibility is a third level eligibility for third level position. And this is required of school division superintendent. Now, in the BARM, we have the Bangsamoro Director General, which a position that is supposed to be the highest career position in a certain ministry. So, in the MBHT, we have, I think, 3 or 4 Director Generals. Now, in case of the MBHT, the school division superintendent are required to have CESO eligibility. And so, what I understand is that these are third level position. But they are under the Director General, but the Director General is not required to have a CESO position, which means that the Director General may not be a third level position. So how can a third level position be under the direction or supervision of someone who is not even a third level, occupying a third level position? So medyo tingnan po natin ito kasi parang uh, baka magkaroon tayo ng problema with regards to because we believe that in the seniority of position, dapat yung second level ay ang nag-oversee sa kanya ay third level. So in this case, school division superintendent third level, pero yung director general ay mukhang hindi siya third level. Thank you very much.
Minister Jajuri.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we recognize the concern, and our understanding is that the categorization of the school district superintendent is based on a Supreme Court decision. And this came before hopefully the enactment of this civil service code. And as we mentioned earlier, the provisions also provide for some exceptions, recognizing that there's jurisprudence where the Supreme Court required the career executive eligibility of the school district superintendent. And that's an exception to the rule. So, considering the history that is unfolding, no, from the Supreme Court jurisprudence and then the enactment of the Bangsamoro Civil Service Code, that will still be recognized but will be considered as an exception, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Jajuri. Next to interpolate, MP Attorney Tago.
But sir, Mr. Speaker, may we first recognize MP Ali Sanki because he is in the list.
Is that connected with
Yes.
with the subject matter?
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable from Maguindanao, MP Alisanki is recognized.
And then to be followed by MP Amir Mawali. He's already here.
We will Majority Leader. We will recognize based on the entry
Yes.
of the members into this chamber.
Yes, Mr.
MP Tago entered first prior to the entry of MP Mawali. So we will recognize after MP Sanki,
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
MP Tago, followed by MP Mawali. In that order. Please proceed, MP Sanki, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I just would like to relate to this body that yesterday I was handed by the Philippine Sharia Lawyers Incorporated a paper about the proposed Article 117 of the Civil Service Code on Sharia. And just to share some ideas, I was then the Secretary of the Office on Muslim Affairs when the issue on the implementation of the Sharia court was taken up in the Office of Muslim Affairs. But before that, I would like to inform this body that the implementation of the Code of Muslim Personal Laws of the Philippines was in pursuant with PD 1083. This PD was crafted, and I was a researcher, a staff of Dean Mahul, with Attorney Mike Mastura and Attorney Musibuat, that led to the creation of the Code on Muslim Personal Laws of the Philippines. Just for food for thought, because it's very important, the PD 1083 was issued as a presidential decree by President Marcos on February 1977. But the first Sharia bar examination took place in 1984. From 1984 up to the time that I was the Secretary of the Office of Muslim Affairs in 2010, there were about close to 700 Sharia lawyers. But this is very regrettable, Mr. Speaker, that while PD 1080 created 5 Sharia District Court, 51 Circuit Court, the Sharia District Court is almost equivalent to the Regional Trial Court. But very ironical that up to this point in time, not one of the 5 Sharia District Court was made operational. Out of 51 Circuit Court, likened to a municipal circuit court for the Muslim, to make the Muslim better Muslim, out of 51, only 30 was made operational. And then we have close to 700 Muslim Sharia lawyers. Why we have not been able to make it operational? I'm referring to the Sharia District Court. And out of 51, why only 30? When we have more than enough Sharia lawyers. So this is something that this August body, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, must take a look into. And that it is worth mentioning here that during my time at the Office of Muslim Affairs, no less than Governor Gwendolyn Garcia of Cebu was asking us, even to the point of writing a letter to the Supreme Court, asking for the putting up of a Sharia court in Cebu and Bacolod. You can just imagine. They want to have a Sharia court in Cebu and also in Bacolod. And that I met the court administrator in Manila, Mr. Perez, and they were even contemplating to put up a Sharia Hall of Justice in the main office of the Supreme Court. But that would require a Muslim legislator in Congress to supplement the idea of the Honorable Governor of Cebu. So what I'm saying here, Mr. Speaker, is that if we want to make the Muslim better Muslim, I think the government is giving us everything. But it is because of ourselves, Muslims themselves, who failed to react positively. And that, in fact, there was a complaint that if I'm not contented in a decision of the Sharia court, where will I go? Because PD 1083 did not create the Sharia appellate court. And the government created under Republic Act 1954, enhancing the power of the autonomous region. it created the Sharia appellate court. And what happened? We have not been able to enact the enabling law to implement the Sharia appellate court. So you see, to my mind, this provision, this proposed civil code on the Sharia court should be, as I look at it, this is good enough. But what is lacking is the concerted effort to make the Muslim better Muslim by pursuing this Sharia court implementation. That in fact, I wish to inform this body that during this time, even Davao City was asking for us to put up a Sharia court. Even Baguio City was asking for us to put up a Sharia court. And I suppose that it's very timely that the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region Muslim Mindanao will be able to enhance the implementation of the Sharia courts in the Philippines. However, while I was receiving this document from a gentleman who I suppose is still in this chamber, I was asking, what is the status of this? We have the Philippine Sharia Lawyers Incorporated. I suppose that in the public hearing when we were discussing of the Civil Code, they should have been invited in a public hearing to contribute to this idea on the Civil Code of the Autonomous Region Muslim Mindanao. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to put on record that what I have just stated is a part of my statement to support the immediate approval of the BARM Civil Service Code on Sharia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, MP Sangki. There was no question in his remarks, so we move on to the next interpolator. MP Attorney Tago, you're recognized. Be followed by MP Mawalil, MP Saliga, and MP Loong in that order.
Maraming salamat, kagalang-galang na tagapagsalita. Una sa lahat, before I make my interpellation, aking taus-pusong pagpupugay sa mga taong gumawa at sumakatupad ng Bangsamoro Civil Service Code, most particularly sa chairman ng Cabinet Cluster, Minister Engineer Aida Silungan, ang chair ng panel that conducted the public consultation, Minister Attorney Raisa Jajuri, and of course, the chair and the members of the technical working group who assisted the committees, and finally, to the chair of the Committee on Rules, Majority Floor Leader Attorney Lanang Ali Jr. and his members, and to our members of the Parliament, to my colleagues who contributed immensely in the enhancement of this historic Bangsamoro Civil Code. Again, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Tanong ko lang, Mr. Speaker, clarification. Because I was bothered in the wording that was put in the Bangsamoro Organic Law. Section 39, Article 7 of the Bangsamoro Organic Law, or 11054, mentions the enactment of the Bangsamoro Civil Service Law, provided that shall be in accordance with existing national law in case of conflict with the national laws, the Constitution, and existing national civil service laws, rules, and regulations shall prevail. And to be compared to Article 16, Section 4 of the same organic law, the Bangsamoro Transition Authority may also enact a Bangsamoro Civil Service Code as provided in the organic law, subject to the constitutional mandate of the Civil Service Commission. Ngayon po, Mr. Speaker, ang tanong ko, una kong tanong, bakit tayo gumagawa ngayon ng Bangsamoro Civil Service Code? Sinasabi naman sa batas na dapat consistent sa national laws and Constitution, National Civil Service Laws, Rules and Regulation. Kung ganun din ang nasa isip ng framers ng Bangsamoro Organic Law, dapat nilagay na lang that the civil servants of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region shall be governed by the National Civil Service Laws, Rules and Regulation, and the Constitution. Bakit pa tayo gumagawa ng Civil Service Code ngayon? Tanong ko sa proponent, Mr. Speaker.
Minister Jejuri, please respond.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I think the basis would still be the provision that the good gentleman from Lanao cited, which is Section 39, which, as he read, provides for the power of the Parliament to enact its own civil service code. And I think that is important because in the same provision, it also says that the disciplinary authority of the Bangsamoro over its employees is also recognized, so that the Civil Service Code can also clarify the internal processes based on rules that may be promulgated by the Bangsamoro on the matter of disciplining its employees. That's one reason, Mr. Speaker. However, and also, I think even with that provision, and as we engage with the National Civil Service Commission, while the general rule is we abide and we should be covered by the Constitution and national laws, we are given some leeway in some specific matters that are unique and peculiar to the Bangsamoro region, for as long as it does not go directly against any national law, Mr. Speaker.
That's right, Mr. Speaker. That's why the national government, Mr. Speaker, authorizes the Bangsamoro government to enact Bangsamoro Civil Service Code in order to craft our Civil Service Code that will be in consonance to our culture, that will be in consonance to our religious belief, and that will be in consonance to our quest for right to self-determination. Kaya po yan, binigay sa ating national government. Kaya ang tanong ko, Mr. Speaker, dapat, with your respect to my panyera, the majority floor leader, who is one of the proponent of the code, the civil service code that we will make should be directed to what will be the needs of our constituents. For example, Mr. Speaker, dito ba sa code na ito, saan may ilalagay yung mga ulama natin? Saan ilalagay yung mga hafiz nagtapos sa abroad? Daming nagtatapos na sa Arabic learning. Saan ilalagay yung mga asatids, kadami-dami, mga ustadis, saan ilalagay? Dapat, the main concern, with your respect, Mr. Speaker, is these people that I mentioned. Dapat doon nakadirect. Dahil yung ibang provision with your respect, dito sa ginawang Bangsamoro Civil Service Code, yung iba, pinikap natin sa ora-ora. Yung iba, pinikap natin sa RACS, which is, of course, it is a creation from the national government. This Civil Service Code was granted to us by the national government. Gumawa tayo ng sarili nating Civil Service Code kasi dapat nakatuon doon sa pangangailangan ng Bangsamoro Autonomous Region ni Muslim Mindanao. Yun ang sa aking pananaw, Mr. Speaker.
there a question there, MP Tago?
Yes,
Can you restate
I need
again?
a reply from the proponent kung what will be her reaction, Mr. Speaker.
So it was a rhetorical question, MP Raisa Jajuri.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, but let me just reiterate also that under the Bangsamoro Organic Law, we are directed, the Parliament or the Bangsamoro government is directed to enact that law, and it should contain the following matters. The conduct of civil servants, the qualifications for non-elective positions, the adoption of a merit and fitness system, protection of civil service eligibles, as well as the disciplinary authority of the Bangsamoro government over its own officials and employees. So that would be the parameters of the the contents, no, substantive wise, that should be found in the Civil Service Code. So regarding the ulama, the hafiz, if they are part of the civil service, there should be provisions regarding their employment in the government. But as I mentioned yesterday, Mr. Speaker, with respect to Madaris education, the qualifications for teachers or under the Madaris system, our proposal is to uh, provide for that in under the Education Code, Mr. Speaker, so that the Civil Service Code will apply to them, but based on qualifications that are set out under the Education Code, Mr. Speaker. There are also some other unique matters that the Civil Service Code covers, like our own training institution. So we included here the onboarding seminars to be provided by the Development Academy of the Bangsamoro. There's a provision on Mujahideen and some other provisions, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I asked that basic question, general principle question, Mr. Speaker, kasi sa aking pananaw, may inconsistency sa provisions ng Section 39, Article 7 at saka Article 16, Section 4 of the Bangsamoro Organic Law. Ang sinasabi kasi ng which is the most specific provision, yung Article 16, which is Article 16 kasi sa mandate ng Bangsamoro Transition Authority. It pertains to the Bangsamoro Transition Authority. Article 16, sinasabi dito, gagawa tayo ng Civil Service Law ayon sa mandato ng Civil Service Commission. Hindi sinasabi na ayon sa consistent, ayon sa consistent sa Civil Service Rules, Civil Service Laws, Rules and Regulations. Ang sinasabi lang, ayon sa mandato ng Civil Service Commission. So anong mandato ng Civil Service Commission? Mag-screen sila ng appointment, being the central personnel agency of the national government, mag-screen ng appointment based on merit and fitness. But the merit and fitness ang sinasabi sa batas, sa ating constitution mismo, is very generic term. Pwedeng ikaw may merit, pero wala kang fitness. O kaya fitness, hindi natin alam. Yung lumpo, pwedeng fitness din ang lumpo. May lumpo na magaling, magaling siyang sumuntok, magaling magsiko. Ganon. So that merit fitness defines sa constitution natin na may generic meaning. Kaya nga sinasabi ko, dito sa atin sa BARM, kaya sample lang yan, Mr. Speaker, sample lang yan. Kaya ko binigay na sample yun dahil tayo dito sa BARM, pwede tayo gumawa ng sariling qualification standard. Kasi ang sinasabi lang ng batas, gagawa tayo under Article 16, Section 4, gagawa tayo ng Civil Service Law and according to the mandate of the, provided it is mandate of the Civil Service Commission. Hindi sinasabi sa batas, and consistent with the provision with the National Civil Service Laws, rules and regulations. So yun ang interpretation ko sa dalawang batas, Mr. Speaker.
Well, these provisions appear in the same law, and I think we should read them together.
Yes, that's true. Thank you, Mr.
And not put opposite a meaning that would provide opposite positions, Mr. Speaker. So we're reading it holistically as they appear in one law, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is position, but I will maintain my position, Mr. Speaker, that being autonomous government, we can craft our own qualification standard system provided that yung sinasabi nga nila, we have merit, you have fitness, and others, you have morality. Pangalawa, tanong Mr. Speaker, kasi if maliit pa ako noon eh. Pero yung mga nakakatanda dito, alam ito.
Ano yun?
Nung time ni Marcos, may binigay sa mga cultural communities na eligibility. Ang pagkadinig ko noon, RCCO. Yung medyo matatanda dito, medyo alam yata. Ako, high school pa yata ako noon, narinig ko na yung RCCO, RCCE, and assembled. Yun ba ay pinag-aralan po natin para may apply sa ating mga taga-Bangsamoro. Kaya ko ito sinasabi, Mr. Speaker, kinrate ang BARM for the purpose of Bangsamoro. Para we can upgrade our standing in the nation. Kaya kinrate ang BARM. Sa Malaysia, Mr. Speaker, as a brief background kasi pero alam naman yata ito lahat. Kaya nakahahon yung mga Malays because nag-adapt sila ng policy, yung sinasabi natin bumiputra, is give priority to the Malays. Kasi dati ang Malaysia control ng mga Chinese. Now, dahil nakikita yun ng mga Malays, nawala sila sa eksena, nag-adapt sila ng policy bumiputra to prioritize the Malays, to give them priorities. And they give them sufficient opportunities sa mga Malays. Kaya ngayon, Malay, prosperous country in the world. So, ganun, tanong ko, Mr. Speaker, pinag-aralan ba natin, kasi para mabigyan natin ang oportunidad ang ating mga kababayan na Bangsamoro. Because we know for a fact, kaya tayo nag-rebelde dahil nahuli tayo sa pag-aral ng Western education dahil may pinaglalaban tayo. May pinaglalaban tayo. Nahuli yung mga anak natin, yung mga kamag-anak natin. So, dapat, Mr. Speaker, mayroon tayong consideration sa qualification standard na mabigyan sila na sufficient eligibility itong mga kababayan natin. If the proponent is willing, kung napag-aralan nila yung sinasabi ko, RCCO, RCCE, pero pang na-symbol eh. Yung sinasabi yung mga na-symbol. Mr. Speaker.
Mr.
Well,
Jajuri.
Mr. Speaker, although I was also young then, I also know that there was that law that allowed for providing for eligibility for those who have
Cultural
rendered
minorities.
service for cultural minorities as well. But the provision of the Civil Service Code that we are now proposing, there is a section or an article regarding special examinations for Moro and non-Moro indigenous peoples, so that the Bangsamoro government shall request the Civil Service Commission for the provision of the special examination. We cannot direct the Civil Service Commission, Mr. Speaker, to for the Civil Service Commission to administer said law because it's a constitutional body. We don't have control over it. um, and cannot direct it to conduct or administer the special examination. But there is this provision that gives the message that this is our request, this is our intent, and that we will ask the Civil Service Commission to administer such special examination, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with the indulgence of my colleague, the acting majority floor leader, ang pagkalam ko noon, yung mga eligibility noon, maski yung sa CISO, eligibility, executive managerial, training. Training ang ginagawa na walang examination. Kasi kaya nga ginagawang training na lang, hours of training, dahil yung iba, mahirap pumasa sa written examination. Kaya biglang para konsiderasyon, ginagawa na lang training para makapasa o civil service eligible. Mininsiyon ko ito, Speaker, para expound natin kasi this civil service code is very important. Ito yung poste ng administrative code. Ginawa natin yung administrative code, pero ang poste niya, itong civil service code. Pag mahina itong civil service code natin, babagsak yung admin code. With due respect. Ito ang poste niya. Kasi ito ang hawak ng gobyerno, the civil servants. Hawak sa admin. So, yun lang. Kung mamarapatin, pag-aralan po natin, may apply sa atin yung mga ganong proseso noon, which no, during that time, maraming nakinabang. Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, we recognize that even if the general understanding is that you have to pass certain examinations in order to be eligible, there are still positions which will not require that, and the eligibility will be based on other matters. For example, Mr. Speaker, there's a recognition of eligibility if you are, for example, a sanggunian barangay member, or there's the veteran preference rating eligibility, skills eligibility under different categories, scientific and technological specialist eligibility, honor graduate eligibility, foreign school honor graduate eligibility, and so forth, Mr. Speaker.
Including those who graduated cum laude, am I correct?
Yes, honor graduate and and foreign school honor graduate eligibility, Mr. Speaker.
Do you have further
Yes,
questions?
my last two questions,
Can you abbreviate that into one?
One. I will limit my questions to one. Kanina, binanggit kanina yung Sharia bar passers. Ano ang stand natin dito sa Civil Service Code regarding Sharia bar passers?
As mentioned, Mr. Speaker, we incorporated the language of ora-ora, and therefore, for bar passers from 2014 onwards, they are eligible for first and second level positions. But for bar passers before 2014, Sharia. Yes, for Sharia bar, the eligibility would be up to level 1, the first level. And as we explained, Mr. Speaker, this is based on a Supreme Court, the ora-ora provision emanates from Supreme Court decisions which has the power over the administration of the Sharia bar. Prior to 2014, a non-lawyer may take the Sharia bar exam if they are college degree holders who have completed the seminar on Islamic law and jurisprudence, or college degree holders in Islamic law and jurisprudence of Al-Azhar University or of any other Islamic institutions of the same category in other countries. And then the third category of qualified examinees would be graduates of Islamic secondary schools duly authorized by the Philippine government where Islamic law and jurisprudence are taught as part of the curriculum and have completed the seminar on Islamic laws and jurisprudence. That's for the non-lawyer. They changed the rule in 2014 in Bar Matter 2716 and they dropped the third category, Mr. Speaker, thereby saying that only college degree holders, whether from local local schools, sorry, or other or foreign schools like Al Azhar and other Islamic institutions, can take the examination. And this is the reason why the Ora rule appears that way, that there's a delineation between those who took the examination prior to 2014 and those who took it after with respect to their eligibility.
So,
MP Dago.
Mr. Speaker, if you pass the Sharia bar exam before 2014 and you are a college graduate, meaning you graduated for a 4-year course, if you are a college graduate of a 4-year course, you are only eligible for first level position, Mr. Speaker, for clarificatory purposes, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, because the rule in Ora provides for that delineation, that is the consequence of the provision.
So, because I will make in due time, Mr. Speaker, I will make a necessary amendments. Kasi, pag before 2014 ka, hindi ka lang 4-year course graduate ka ng law, hindi ka lang naging lawyer, graduate ka ng law, at bibigay sa'yo salary grade 9. That's for me, that's degrading to the one who has that position. So yun ang position ko, Mr. Speaker. Dapat lahat sila, Mr. Speaker, qualified up to the second level position without any distinctions. Because with due respect sa ora-ora ng civil service, kasi ang ora-ora kasi at saka RACS, fluctuating yan. I think it was mentioned during the committee on rules meeting ni itong acting speaker na mention niya yan, fluctuating. Kaya nga sa Pilipinas wala tayong civil service code. Ang sa atin lang civil service rules and regulations. Minsan yung rules nila inadapt from the decision of the Supreme Court jurisprudence. Nilagay nila sa rules. Fluctuating yan, pwedeng palitan. So, pwede tayong humingi with representation sa civil service na may magkaroon sila ng leniencies dito sa mga Sharia bar passers, Mr. Speaker. That is my consideration and in due time, I will file my necessary amendments, Mr. Speaker. In the last question, Mr. Speaker, yung sa definition, hindi, yung sa provision regarding mujahidin and mujahidat. Kasi mayroong nilagay din doon na first level position lang sila pwede. So, sa akin palagay, Mr. Speaker, that will be limiting the position that will be given to the mujahidin and the mujahidat. Mr. Speaker, with due respect, Mr. Speaker, yung mga mujahidin natin, kaya ako nakatayo dito na because of the mujahidin. So, the government, marirealize din na national government na pag pinalawak natin yung level of position that will be given na transitory period to the mujahidin, they will understand. Because as part of the peace agreement package na itong mga mujahidin natin pumunta sa gobyerno, hindi pumunta sa gobyerno para mabigyan consideration, Mr. Speaker. So that's my position, Mr. Speaker. Hindi lang i-limit doon sa first level position. Kasi ang first level position hanggang salary grade 9. And the salary, pag inalis mo yung mga deduction, mga 10,000 lang yan, 11,000. So, hindi sapat na mamuhay ng uh, sapat, Mr. Speaker. That's my position, Mr. Speaker. So, in due time also, I will make a necessary amendment when the time comes, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, may I just manifest a few things? First, regarding the Sharia uh, lawyers provision, we are open to proposals that would reflect the rationale for the rules that came out under the Ora. At the opportune time, Mr. Speaker, we can consider language that may be proposed by the good gentleman that would cover the distinction and will also consider the educational attainment or the degree of the Sharia bar examinee. Sorry. Regarding the Mujahideen, Mr. Speaker, this is a provision. It's actually a special provision. It appears in the transitory provisions of the bill, and in fact, it covers those who do not have eligibility, saying that despite that, they can still be appointed, albeit on a temporary basis that can be renewed for 3 times, and that there is also an effort uh, to have them integrated permanently in the civil service by way of trainings that may be offered by the Development Academy of the Bangsamoro. There's also that provision that gives respect to the structure of the MILF and the MNLF, saying that the Mujahideen and Mujahidat mentioned under this provision shall be based on a list to be provided uh, by the fronts covering their organic members, Mr. Speaker.
In other words, we are foregoing with the eligibility requirements by their simple membership in the two fronts. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, but also with certain rules. There's a 30% cap provided under the rules. This is also a product of the dialogue uh, with the National Civil Service Commission, Mr.
Okay.
Speaker.
Do you have further question, MP Tago?
No further question, Mr. Speaker.
Yes,
Thank you
because you
very
have
much.
you have abbreviated your 2 questions into 3.
No further question. Maraming salamat, Mr. Speaker.
Thank
To
you
our
very much.
Majority Floor Leader and the
Yes.
proponent
Thank you,
of
Your
the
Honor, for walking us
Yes,
down
Mr.
memory
Speaker.
lane.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Majority Leader.
May we remind our colleague that if their question will avail them in the period of amendment because they are proposing amendments, may we request them to instead
Yes.
bring that matter during the period of amendment, Mr. Speaker.
again,
That's just a
yes.
reminder, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, we reiterate, members of this chamber, if you have proposals, the period of amendment, better avail of the period of amendment. So we can fast track the deliberation of the Civil Service Code. It's actually one of the primary priority codes that we are tasked to enact during transition period. Next to interpolate is MP Mawalil, the gentleman from Sulu. Your Honor, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a note. I believe that if you want to avail of the period of amendments, you should also participate during the period of interpellation.
That is
Just my
correct,
thought,
Your Honor.
Mr.
That is correct, Your
Speaker.
Honor. It is
Uh,
just an appeal to fast track.
Just
the
to put it on
deliberation.
record, Mr. Speaker, that this is a requisite to the period of amendments. Mr. Speaker, will the proponent, my fellow Tausug MP, allow some clarificatory questions?
Please proceed,
Yes,
MP
Mr.
Mawalil.
Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, taking off from my fellow MP Tago's question earlier, assuming that we will not enact a Bangsamoro Service Code. Mr. Speaker, what will happen to the bureaucracy? And earlier, the proponents also said that we are enacting a separate Bangsamoro Civil Service Code because we wanted to provide some leeways, in her own words, leeways to some unique features within the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. My question, Mr. Speaker, on that is, how do we qualify the word leeways in this context?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I believe that we can provide for certain rules and include them in the Bangsamoro Civil Service Code for as long, for example, as I mentioned earlier, we gave premium to the role of the Development Academy of the Bangsamoro. Since we have that institution, we incorporated that matter in the civil service in the Bangsamoro Civil Service Code, which will not appear in the national rules. We also have the job portal, which is also mentioned in the administrative code, and which we also included in the Bangsamoro Civil Service Code. And then the matter of the Mujahideen, which was mentioned earlier, since this is a special provision. And in the words of the Civil Service Commission, in its resolution, that based on equity and taking into account the provision of the BOL regarding rehabilitation, reintegration of the Mujahideen, they allowed it, the transitory provision. So I think for as long as there is no rule that is directly opposed, no, that we directly oppose, uh, and in the case of the Mujahideen, while that's a special provision, it was a product also of negotiation and dialogue with the Civil Service Commission, Mr. Speaker. So I do not have a list yet of all these deviations, if you may, but we are working on it, Mr. Speaker.
In line with that, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the response of the proponent. In line with that, may this representation request uh, to follow a list of the some of the things that were articulated by the lady MP from Sulu? A list?
List. Yes, that's the matter I referred to earlier, Mr. Speaker. We're still working on it, and we hope to send it maybe within the day, but later
Yeah.
in the day,
Thank
Mr.
you very
Speaker.
much. To follow up on my first original question, in a nutshell, what will happen to the farm bureaucracy if we do not pass or enact a Bangsamoro Civil Service Code?
I guess since the BOL clearly provides that we are still under the Civil Service Commission, uh, I would suppose that they will just implement the national laws and rules and have the bureaucracy of the Bangsamoro covered by those laws and rules, Mr. Speaker.
So clarify, there is not actually much difference if we do not legislate Bangsamoro Civil Service Code. Because
Well,
we can always follow the national guidelines, rules, and regulations of the Civil Service Commission. Am I right, Mr. Speaker?
well, not exactly, Mr. Speaker, because as we said earlier, there are some leeways that are provided to us. This is an opportunity to look at the specific situation of the Bangsamoro bureaucracy and its employees and see whether we can have that provision that may not be there in the national laws or rules, but will apply to us. So we lose that opportunity if we don't pass Bangsamoro Civil Service Code, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that very responsive reply. My next question, Mr. Speaker, will this Bangsamoro Civil Service Code only applies to during the transition period?
No, Mr. Speaker. It will apply upon its effectivity, and it will continue to be effective until and unless it is repealed or amended by this parliament or future parliaments, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Going back to the discussion yesterday between the proponent and my fellow MP Ampatuan, uh, I'd like to just a brief on what is the definition in this context in the Bangsamoro Civil Service Code, the definition of third level eligibility, third level positions in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, Muslim Mindanao.
Um, Third level, but we do not define it in the code, Mr. Speaker, because our proposal is that instead of a third level position category, there should be a second level category covering second level positions where which allows or which gives the mandate to the employee to exercise executive or managerial functions, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you for that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to follow up on the definition in the context of Bangsamoro Civil Service Code, the definition of career positions.
Career service. Specific, may I know, Mr. Speaker, what specific provision?
May we request the gentleman from Sulu to be more
I am
specific
asking
about
on the definition.
the definition?
So just to lay the predicate.
I think the gentleman is referring to Article 9. Tama po. So that's provision on career service, which says that it shall be characterized by entrance based on merit and fitness to be determined as far as practicable by competent examination, but does not apply to appointments to positions which are policy determining, primarily confidential, or highly technical qualifications. And number two, opportunity for advancement to higher career positions. And three, security of tenure. And then there's an enumeration of the, the positions covered by the career service.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the discussion, in the conversation yesterday, I think I came across discourse on the third level positions as which the proponent or some of the members of parliament yesterday described as those who are appointed by the president. Am I right, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I think the good lady MP from Sulu, we were together in the crafting of the in the committee level and up to the plenary level, crafting of the uh, Bangsamoro Human Rights Commission. And I do understand that if my recollection is right, that the appointment of that the president shall appoint the chairperson and the two commissioners for the Bangsamoro Human Rights Commission. Mr. Speaker, in this context, how do we treat the positions of the chairperson, the two commissioners of the Bangsamoro Human Rights Commission?
Uh, with the passage of the BHRC law and then which was superseded by the administrative code, Mr. Speaker, the chair and the commissioners are to be appointed by the president. However,
Upon
they are not. They cannot be considered career service positions since they have a fixed term and there is a specific provision on this matter, Article 11, which enumerates the non-career service. And number 3 in the enumeration would be chairpersons and members of commissions and boards with fixed terms of office and their personal or confidential staff, Mr. Speaker. So they are not third level positions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So that is very clear that the positions of the the two commissioners of the Bangsamoro Human Rights, as well as the chairperson of the Commission of the Bangsamoro Commission on Bangsamoro Human Rights Commissions are not third level. Am I right?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, they're
Because
not
they have
even
fixed
career
term.
service.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Proceeding to my next last two questions, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed, MP
Just
Morales.
wanted to wrap up. Mr. Speaker, under item 3 of Article 9, we must specify the positions referred to so as to avoid being declared as void on grounds of vagueness. Would all positions created by the Parliament be considered as career service? Can we limit the definition to only those created and consequently appointed by the Chief Minister to limit only to those with higher salary grades?
May we know, Mr. Speaker, what provision the good gentleman is referring to? Article?
Article 9, item 3.
Yes, what is the question? I saw the article, but the vagueness is in what specific
The gentleman
phrase?
from Surulu will restate his question
So
again.
under item 3 of Article 9, we must specify the positions referred to
Mm.
as to avoid being declared as void on grounds of vagueness. So ang gusto ko lang malaman yung mga career positions lang yung mga career kino-consider lang ba natin na career positions yung mga positions created by the parliament or yung mga positions created by the ano to office of the Ministry of Finance, yung through NOSCA, etc.
I think it says that positions in the BARM, and this is qualified by the opening paragraph, and therefore these positions should comply with the requirements provided in the opening paragraph, meaning there is entrance based on merit and fitness, and then there's opportunity for advancement, and then there's security of tenure, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My last question, Mr. Speaker, is a clarification as to the filing of anonymous complaints. What is the procedure, Mr. Speaker, how to examine complainant and veracity of complaint? What is the quantum of proof needed? Will the disciplining authority act both as complainant and prosecutor in lieu of the presence of the anonymous complainant?
Uh, as to the quantum of evidence, it would still be substantial evidence, as is always the case in administrative cases.
So, do you think there's no need to articulate in the provision, Mr. Speaker? Or will there be supplementary phrases that are needed to qualify?
Well, if the good gentleman wants to include a specific provision there, we can consider that during the period of amendment, the specific language.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that generous response. However, uh, there was no intention on my part to introduce some amendments during the period of amendment, but I will try to revisit the provision.
Well,
Thank you very much for the responses that I got from my fellow MP Raisa Jejuri.
Thank you, MP Mawalil. Next to interpolate is MP Saliga, MP Makaraya, MP Damdaman Latif. You may submit your names to the secretariat so that you'll also be included in the list of interpolators. After MP Saliga, we will take a 15-minute break for Asar prayer. MP Saliga, please proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I have some clarification and question, Mr. Speaker, if the gentleman from
not
Sulu
again.
is gentle lady, I mean, from Sulu is amenable or
Please proceed, MP Saliga.
yes,
Yes,
the first
Mr.
one,
Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, on the definition, we talk about the Civil Service Commission for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Right now, Mr. Speaker, do we have this office or agency?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, there was a Civil Service Commission memorandum circular saying that the regional office that has jurisdiction over the BARM will be called the the Civil Service Commission for the Bangsamoro. So it's already existing, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, looking at this Civil Service Code, Mr. Speaker, I came across this term disciplining officers. So who are this and what are is it from the different offices or are they created by this code?
May we know, Mr. Speaker, so that we can check uh, what
Like
specific provision?
yes, like Article 270 on the motion for reconsideration, Chapter 10. Uh, if I may read, Mr. Speaker,
Yes, Mr.
there's
Speaker.
a statement here, a provision here that the party adversely affected by the decision may file a motion for reconsideration before the office of the disciplining authority. Then who is this? Who will render the decision within 15 days? Is it built in with the different offices or ministries or is it a separate?
Well, generally, Mr. Speaker, one category would be the appointing officers can also discipline the appointee, but there may also be disciplining powers of supervisors over their supervisee or their subordinates. That would be the categories, Mr. Speaker.
With the civil service commissions for BARM, what will be the participation in the implementation of this civil service code?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the code itself provides for the different functions and powers of the Civil Service Commission. So, for example, in what article? In the appeal of cases, in the receipt of complaints over appointments, they have powers. So we can look through and read through the specific provisions. But since the BOL says that we are still under the mandate of the Civil Service Commission, then the powers of the Civil Service Commission, as provided in the laws and in the specific provisions here in the code, will still stand and they will exercise those powers, Mr. Speaker.
So, Mr. Speaker, meaning to say, upon the ratification of this law or passage of this law, it does not create any office like a civil service commission farm or
Well,
any structures for this purpose.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's no separate civil service commission for BARM. what we call a Civil Service Commission for BARM is still a unit, regional unit of the National Civil Service Commission, Mr. Speaker. And it's already there. It has been created, or through the that circular, it converted the regional office of the BARM to the Civil Service Commission for BARM, Mr. Speaker.
I understand, Mr. Speaker, that cases that could be brought to the disciplining officers are administrative cases.
Yes,
Am I right?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, that some would be uh, disciplinary cases, administrative cases, Mr. Speaker.
Then for cases that cannot be handled or cannot be resolved within the uh, level of the disciplining authority, will the complainant or the public servant can brought it to the Service Commission for appropriate resolution?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, that is correct.
With that, Mr. Speaker, and lastly, Mr. Speaker, because I also came across with the provisions on the special examination for indigenous peoples.
Yes.
Actually, my clarification about this, Mr. Speaker, is what is special about this?
Well, I think the the intent of the provision, as it says specifically, is to promote inclusivity and accelerate the development in our areas. And therefore, we are asking the appropriate government agencies, including the Civil Service Commission, to reach out to the indigenous peoples. And this is not just the non-Moro, but also the people who ascribe to the Bangsamoro identity. To reach out to them and to provide for special examination intended for them, meaning it's not the regular. It may not be in the regular program. It may not be in the regular schedule, but a special one, uh, only for the Moro and non-Moro indigenous peoples, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, because I find this provision relevant, especially in the case of the indigenous peoples in the remote communities where no regular teachers, for example, or public servants want to be assigned. So with this provision, I am very hopeful that they will be, of course, provided with such accreditation or equivalent recognition for their effort and become part of the of our government
Okay. Yes,
structures.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Saliga. So we will take a 15-minute break for Asar. And then after that, we will resume. And then we will continue. Yes, we will continue the period of debate and interpellation. So just to remind the list of interpellators, when we came back, when we go turn and then continue the deliberation, these are the members who will interpellate the proponent: MP Loong, MP Rimbang, Mujahid, Damdaman Latif, Makaraya, and Alamia. So those are the interpellators. But I guess we have a special guest. May we, for the proper acknowledgement, may we ask the names of our guests before we take a 15-minute break as a prayer.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to
Yes, MP Mussolini.
uh, I would like to move for the suspension of the rules to recognize our
So
distinguished
first,
guest.
we will suspend first the period of debate and interpellation. MP Mussolini, please proceed.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, we are privileged this afternoon to have the United Nations resident coordinator to be with us. His name is Gustavo Gonzalez, the United Nations resident and humanitarian coordinator.
with his colleague, Christopher Falstead, Peace and Development Officer.
Yes, MP Luni, apologies. Yes. So can you again? I have here we have fortunate enough to have the our guest from the UN Resident Coordinator's official mission to Cotabato City. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. Does the gentleman from Maguindanao wishes for our guest to address the Parliament?
Yes, if the honorable speaker would allow us to give a few minutes for our guest to give a short message for the Bangsamoro Parliament.
Okay. Thank you very much. So just to welcome,
Mr.
officially
Speaker,
welcome.
suspend the rules first.
We have already suspended the rules, Deputy Speaker Dan. So on behalf of the Speaker of the Parliament, Attorney Pangalian M. Balindong, and the head of the government of the day, Chief Minister Ibrahim Murad, we welcome the delegation from the UN Residence Coordinators to the Bangsamoro people, to the House of the Bangsamoro people.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank BARM authorities for this kind invitation. I'm the new representative of the United Nations in the Philippines. This is my first trip to Cotabato, so this is a great honor. And I'm here with you at the moment that you are discussing key elements of the transition process. So thank you very much. At the same time, I would like to convey a message from the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Gutierrez, congratulating BARM authorities for the recent anniversary. So you have now 2 years, plenty of challenges, but with very concrete achievement. So the Secretary General is quite proud of engaging the UN in this process. Significant achievement had been accomplished since the establishment of BARM, including forming the transitional government and parliament, the Bangsamoro Transitional Authority present in this hall, institutionalizing moral governance under the leadership of Interim Chief Minister Murad Ibrahim, passing the 2020 and 21 budget and the commissioning of former MILF combatants. At the same time, we have to recognize that due to the complexities of the peace process, due to the COVID-19, there is still a long way to go. What I would like to confirm today in front of you is that the United Nations remains committed to the success of this transition. And the UN, as you know, is a global community of knowledge. We have participated in hundreds of peace processes. This experience, this knowledge is at your disposal. So I strongly encourage you to seize this opportunity and make the most of what the UN can offer. In similar circumstances, in other peace-building process, we realize that now, particularly with the challenges of the COVID-19, we need to join our efforts. We need to make sure that we work together. We need to build coalitions, alliances. This is a moment where the close work between BARM and UN is fundamental. I'm coming from a country that spent many years in getting reconciliation and recovering for different types of conflict. And we have a sort of proverb that we say that individuals can change the course of the day, but partnership can transform history. So here today, with all the challenges that we have ahead, and with the support of the UN, I think that we can be part of this transformation of the history of the Philippines. So I thank you so much for your trust. I thank you so much for this long-standing partnership with the UN, and certainly I remain at your disposal. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. We are grateful for the effort of the UN, the success of the transitional government. MP, yes, do you have further remarks, the gentleman from Maguindanao?
No more, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very
so
much for that. Again, we welcome the delegation, Mr. Gustavo Gonzalez and his party to the House of the Bangsamoro people. Majority Leader, we suspend for 15 minutes for Asar prayer.